One day, a little while ago, I decided to try watching other Pokemon YouTubers to find out what I could do better. I came across this video about Serena from Pokemon X and Y with a little over 800,000 views. For the people who aren't knee-deep in Pokemon anime lore, Serena is an incredibly popular character. Aside from the Kanto trio, she is probably the most popular, and she has the rare distinction of being one of the few anime characters that is more popular than her game counterpart. A video talking about why she's so popular is a great idea, and I'm going to steal that idea now because... Have you ever seen a 7-minute video so awful you have to spend 2 hours watching it? I don't, disagree with the major argument of this video, but everything underpinning it, the actual substance of the argument, is at best so incredibly basic, and at worst shows a lack of willingness to engage with any other part of the show besides X and Y. The main through line is that Serena is not like most girls. While the other female leads were bratty and didn't have storylines, she was a strong, independent woman who absolutely was not a brat. You have to ignore a lot of things to make this point, but here's the most egregious example.
She even cared for him when he was sick as well, showing how much she really cared about him. And we all know Misty would have thrown him in the deep end. She would not have cared.
Well, she did. There was a whole episode about it in the Orange Islands, and you can't fall back on the excuse that was filler because it was also the episode where Misty catches her Poliwag. I'm not expecting people to have an eidetic memory of every episode of a 1200 episode series, but if you're making a video essay, you've got to do your research, man. When you make a broad claim like that downplays other female leads as bratty, it comes across as if you don't care, or worse. Also, don't stretch 4x3 footage to widescreen. It distorts the original image and wrecks the visual balance. It's hard enough getting people to watch old animation, please don't make it harder. I went to see if there were other videos that answered the question about Serena's popularity better. I did my due diligence. I used both the normal search function and YouTube's research tab, now called the trending tab because YouTube is an unserious platform. And what I found were a lot of Pokegirl ranking videos, tier lists, shipping compilations, and an upsetting amount of softcore porn, which I understand given that Serena's an anime girl, but probably shouldn't be on YouTube regardless. But I'm a better person than that. Rather than seethe about what others aren't doing, I decided that if the video I want to exist doesn't, it's up to me to make it. This is a video about why Serena is so popular. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a rant calling Serena the worst character, nor is it going to be a hagiography extolling her as the one true Pokegirl. Being as popular of a character as she is, the fandom both loves and hates her, and both sides of that split are filled with the dumbest and worst people imaginable. I'm also not arguing that Serena is some misunderstood character and that I'm the only one who understands the complexities of her ambitious cinematic masterpiece. But I think there's a stark unwillingness to grapple with the fact that a lot of the fandom's love or hate for Serena is artificial. If you want to understand what that means, then keep watching. And please, watch the whole thing. I'm not going to bring up that other video much more, but the creator made the argument that there were 3 things that made fans love Serena: her personality, shipping, and impact. And I think these are generally correct. Serena has a much more mild personality than her predecessors, at least after the first few episodes. She is sweet, kind, and generally agreeable. This is an appealing trait, especially when you consider that her predecessors were only sweet, kind, and agreeable some of the time. A lot of Serena's initial appeal was a reaction against Best Wishes' female lead. Iris continually patronized Ash, calling him a kid even though she was equally immature. Some people might recognize this as a character quirk that diminishes over time as she matures, but Pokemon fans are incapable of handling nuance, so they are only able to see it as bullying. By contrast, Serena treats Ash with the respect the fans felt he was due, and by virtue of doing that, makes Ash look cooler. If I can give an opinionated but positive take about Serena's personality, regardless of whether you like the nice girl archetype, when you have that sort of character, the moments when they are not sweet, kind, and agreeable stand out by contrast. Serena's dynamic with her mother is an underutilized example. When dealing with her mother, she is sassy and sarcastic, same as any kid who busts their parents' balls. When they fight over Serena's talent for Rhyhorn racing, or penchant for quitting any new hobby whenever it gets too hard, she stands up for herself and is outright confrontational. She is such a different character at these moments that their impact is memorable. There are other examples. When she gets frustrated with her Pokemon and yells at them, when she shows determination to win showcases, or that one time when she threw snowballs at Ash because he was being kind of a dick. Those moments don't have nearly as much weight if Serena was as aggressive as Iris was. On the flip side, the moments when Iris does show a more considerate, kind, and agreeable personality, there are many and sundry in Best Wishes, they stand out as something distinct and sincere. You can have both. Neither are bad. But because Serena is so mild-mannered, if an episode doesn't focus on her, she tends to recede into the background. This isn't a unique problem for Serena. Most of the post-XY series treat the companion characters this way. They tend to silo character moments into specific episodes. This is a Serena episode, this is a Clement episode, and by default, all of them are Ash episodes. There's a defensive emphasis on making characters nice rather than fun. For that reason, the first year of X and Y, from Serena's perspective, is brutal. In broad strokes, you can sum up Serena's storyline in the following way. For X and Y's first year, she didn't have one. There are one or two individual episodes that focus on her, and those are mostly entertaining if you're interested in her as Ash's girlfriend. By the beginning of the second year, she finds her passion in these things called Pokemon showcases, and that becomes her equivalent of Ash's badge quest. She works hard and grows as a trainer through the showcases, and then partway through year 3, she loses her equivalent to the Pokemon League and then fizzles out. The second year and the beginning of the third year are pretty good because she has something to do. Outside of that, it depends on the individual writers to make her shine, and most of them don't because the crush is the one thing they're given to work with. A tipping point for me was the Cave of Mirrors episode, where Ash is transported to an alternate universe where everyone's personality is inverted. Ash is cowardly and weak now, and Pikachu fucking hates him. Clement, normally an overly jovial science geek, now relies on magic and has a far more grounded personality. His sister Bonnie, usually a mature beyond her years snark factory, now speaks very respectfully, especially to her brother, whom she normally shit-talks. Mirror Serena is mean and competent at battles now. So the opposite of that, her normal personality, is that she's nice and she's incompetent. That's the character you get for most of that first year. Serena's real uniqueness among the female leads is that she has an explicit crush on Ash. There's no reciprocation. No, there's not, but the storyline itself is pretty cute for what it is. When Serena and Ash were younger, Serena visited Professor Oak's summer camp, got lost, and Ash helped her and gave her a handkerchief to bandage her wound. Years later, however many no one knows, Serena watches Ash dive off of Lumiose Tower and sets out on a journey to find him and return the handkerchief. That's the inciting incident for her part of the story. At the end of the show, she kisses him on the lips after telling him that when they meet again, she'll be a better woman. It's a good, tied-together story. If you want good romance in your anime, I suggest watching a romance anime, but it's fine for Pokemon. The shipping aspect is the #1 reason Serena is popular by a large margin. It's much more rare that you see fan art of her without Ash in it compared to the other leads, and by proportion, most fanfiction about her involves romance. That is true to some extent with all of the female leads, but only Misty even comes close, and Misty had a 15-year head start. The shipping's popularity is largely exogenous to the show. I don't deny that many people are actually invested in romance for its own sake, but for the fandom, the stakes were actually higher than that. The last time that Pokemon had a dedicated love interest for Ash was with Misty, but only in the first 2 years, and it was never as explicit. There's stuff there, but they pulled back on it after a while, and it hasn't been relevant since. No, it hasn't! People ship May, Dawn, Iris, and a lot of others with Ash because that's what fans do, but none of them had the potential to be real. Now, to be fair, neither did Serena, but her having a crush at all seemed like a promise to the fans. In Best Wishes, Ash got a soft reboot. It seemed like his character growth went away, he was stupider and weak and also a dumb baby. This was not the Ash that the fans wanted to see. X and Y was planned by director Tetsuo Yajima to be a rehabilitation for Ash, to make him cool. One of the ways they were going to make him cool was by viewing Ash through the perspective of a heroine who had a crush on him. This framing appealed to longtime fans because Pokemon anime fans have the biggest case of little brother syndrome I have ever seen. The anime is just one silo of a massive conglomeration of different things that make up the Pokemon franchise, and it's been one of the least significant outside of Japan since the early 2000s. It was perfectly acceptable to play Pokemon as a young adult, but watching the anime? That baby shit?
Why don't you watch a real anime like Death Note or Boku no Pico?
The attitude led to a lot of defensive behavior by anime fans, and X and Y gave the promise of making the anime look cool. Cool guys have cute girlfriends. Most Serena haters will argue that the crush dominates her character and there isn't much else to her. I think the bigger issue is that there was never going to be a conclusion because of the way the show is structured. Even before Best Wishes, Ash resets every year. A permanent girlfriend isn't in the cards. He is effectively an asexual character. Yes, I did see that one episode with Giselle. No, it doesn't change my mind. Much of Serena's romance is almost played off as a comedy routine. There's one famous episode where Serena is invited to a performer ball and she gets awkwardly coaxed into inviting Clement instead of Ash, so Ash gets invited as her rival's date. There's a sequence where the dancers are trading partners, and Serena almost gets to dance with Ash but gets stopped mid-daydream. If you have any knowledge of anime semiotics, you know that this is a long setup for a gag. I'm sure it's common enough that even Japanese children watching were just waiting for the punchline, which is Serena being embarrassed in public. Considering that there is no reciprocation, no equality of vulnerability, the fact that this happens so often feels mean-spirited at times. But even then, the fact that fans tend to misread these gags as legitimate hints of a future relationship weirds me out. There is a clip that, as of this writing, was being passed around on social media.
So cute! You know, Bonnie, that is a cute fetikin.
Most of the quotes and replies go along with the meme that Ash just dodged a bullet. It's a funny meme and not worth bringing up on its own, except that quite a few people bought into the meme as a genuine understanding of the scene, when the reason Ash pauses is to set up the punchline, which, once again, is that Serena is sad. Ash actually having to dial back a comment to protect someone's feelings would imply that he understands them. If he ever had to do that, it would harm his shonen aura, making him far less cool. And in X and Y, that can't happen. The impact argument I have a harder time with. Serena's arc is mostly a side quest, and it doesn't really break new ground. The main storyline of Pokemon X and Y is Team Flare. Even Ash's badge quest is more of a rote procedure when compared to that whole Ash Greninja thing. Serena doesn't factor into these plot points in any way that Clement and Bonnie do. They are major players in the Team Flare arc, and they directly contribute to the Ash Greninja thing. Moreover, the blueprint for Serena's storyline had been done before. Most of it is taken from May. A shallow and clueless girl doesn't really like Pokemon or know what they want to do with their lives. They go on a journey and find their passion in contests or showcases, lose some, win some, and then lose at the end. The conflict with her mother is taken more from Dawn's arc, or maybe Misty's if you interpret her relationship with her sisters in the same way. All in all, Serena's best writing is an assemblage of the writing team's greatest hits. A lot of my negativity here comes from the fact that it doesn't seem like the staff had a plan for Serena at the beginning other than her being infatuated with Ash. Besides the crush making Ash look cool, Tetsuya Yajima said 3 things about Serena's arc. 1. He insisted on the scene where Serena cuts her hair to show her determination. 2. He made sure that all of her outfits looked cute and that her performances looked really good. And 3. He didn't know what to do with Serena's mother, aka the linchpin of her arc. Serena's 2 most memorable moments, at least, were kind of original. The kiss was a last-minute decision on Yajima's part, but it counts. The haircut, while incredibly derivative, also hadn't been done in Pokemon before, and that was planned on at least. But when talking about X and Y or Serena, people often mistake impact for hype. Hype is the specter that clouds any discussion of Serena, and I feel like it needs to be dissected head-on. I mentioned earlier that XY was about making Ash look cool. In service to that goal, director Tetsuya Yajima wanted to make the show look more like a shonen anime than earlier series. Yajima's big advantage was that he hadn't watched Pokemon outside of what he had worked on, so X and Y isn't tied down by convention. The implementation of 3D action sequences and more mature-looking character designs brought in a few new eyes to the anime. People who are interested in Pokemon because it looked like a real anime now. The new look also appealed to older fans who were eager to see Ash grow up. He was still 10 years old, just as he always had been, but now he had sideburns and his limbs were longer. The early 2010s also saw the booming of social media platforms that created new endogamous fan communities. Older forms like Bulbagarden and Cerebi had the built-in institutional memory of longtime Pokemon trends, but sites like Tumblr, Twitter, and especially 4chan didn't. It's also worth noting that by 2013, all of these platforms had the ability to regularly host GIFs and videos, such that you could post long sequences of XY's animation and wow the randos scrolling through the thread. Randomly seeing this sequence from Kaiser Neko's Twitter account might make you stop and think that Pokemon sure has changed. It is fitting that the first series, directed by a guy who hadn't watched previous series, was being watched by a large contingent of fans who were also disconnected from the show before it. It's one of the reasons why people think X and Y is different, and it's probably why that other video was framed the way that it was. There was so much hype that fans, new and old alike, started doing things they wouldn't do normally. Regular fan subgroups for Pokemon had been around since Advanced, but X and Y seems to have been the tipping point where older fans began watching the show primarily in Japanese. The rise of anime streaming sites helped the dissemination of Japanese subtitled footage beyond private trackers, and people were willing to watch raw Japanese episodes just to stay up to date with the goings-on. But not only could you see the new episode right after it aired in Japan, but you could even find out what was happening in the future. In Japan, CoroCoro and other magazines release monthly episode titles and descriptions for Pokemon ahead of time. If you can find someone to acquire the magazine, scan it, and have it translated properly, then by golly, you've got up to 4 weeks to speculate and dream about what's going to happen in Satoshi and Serena's first date, the Tree of Promises and Presents. The first generation of professional YouTubers was beginning to emerge as well, and there was a cottage industry developing for videos about Pokemon games or anime news. If you stalked enough 4chan threads where they posted Japanese merchandise catalogs, maybe you could break the news that Serena was getting a haircut. In the abstract, none of what was happening was new. The Pokemon fandom had been able to find news and screen caps from Japan since the very beginning, and information passed through the fandom like a sieve. But what was novel is that because of how much paratext was now available, you could be a fan of Pokemon just by squatting on social media threads or watching AMVs. You could be a fan of Pokemon without watching it. Serena is a beneficiary and a victim of the hype. A substantial part of her popularity comes from the fact that she was part of X and Y. There is a sobering realization in there that if she had been any other type of character, if her plot had not ever come, if her impact was just that she was the sweet, kind, and agreeable arm candy of the group, then she still would have been popular because she was part of that show. On the other hand, because she is so popular and because the hype train was so big, there was a lot of scrutiny from people who missed the hype train. There are harebrained reasons to hate on Serena. Most of them aren't worth the time debunking. Ipso facto, people are stupid. But there is one major criticism that does warrant discussion, and it's gonna be a bitch to tackle. This is the woke part of the video. If you're gonna be a pussy about it, skip to the next chapter. Before I even try to wade into the quagmire that lies before me, I want to talk about the word sexist. When that word is used in fandom debates of a female character, it's usually done so in a reductive way. In the Pokemon fandom, you'll see discussions about misogyny that lack proper grounding, and so while some threads on Bulbaguard might discuss how the show was sexist, you're far more likely to find people calling the female leads sluts or whores and talking about how to combat patriarchy. The discourse about Serena often conflates depictions of femininity with sexism. There's a reversion to a mid-2000s Joss Whedon-esque understanding of misogyny that if a female character isn't a girl boss, then they're sexist. Femininity is equated to weakness, and if a girl character doesn't do stuff that is cool and actiony, then they are weak or useless. Isn't that right, Naruto fanbase? There is a lot to criticize about Serena's character and development from an anti-patriarchy perspective, but first I want to argue that one of the reasons that Serena is so beloved by fans of all genders is that she represents a type of femininity that had not been present in Pokemon before. Serena is a girly girl of the highest caliber. As Serena's main screenwriter, Akemi Amode, has said, she's an ordinary girl. She sews, she cooks, she likes to dance, and she wants to fall in love. Her predecessors aren't bereft of these qualities. Dawn sews and designs clothes. May enjoys being fashionable and dancing with handsome men, and Misty talks about romance. The difference is, when Misty talks about love, she gets mocked. When May talks about fashion, it's usually presented in a bitches be shoppin' manner. And even Dawn caring for her appearance is derided as a silly thing that the superficial girl does. Serena's femininity is generally accepted and even praised within the context of X and Y. Parts of the fandom disparage Serena being a girly girl as misogynistic, and I do feel the need to push back. Yes, we can interrogate what femininity means and whether certain aspects of it are toxic or indulge the male gaze or support patriarchy, but to be clear, we are not talking about Serena being a trad wife, although a pretty significant portion of the fanbase wants that. We're talking about her being herself without scorn. And the staff got to utilize her femininity so that Serena gets to do a lot of things with her sewing and cooking and dancing that the previous female leads couldn't. That being said, there are things that you just can't not acknowledge. Serena's crush does get mocked by the context of the show. And yes, there is a sexist element to it. The purpose of romance in X and Y is to have a girl character fawn over the male hero, and it leads to the most unequal male-female relationship in the entire franchise. None of the other female leads were equal to Ash, because he was the protagonist and they were the girl character, but at the same time, none of them were subservient to Ash, and Serena is for most of the show. The bratty comment from that other video really sticks in my craw for that reason. Serena isn't like the other girls, she's not bratty. The main reason for that is because she doesn't regularly challenge Ash's authority. In the few instances where Ash is being so ridiculous that she does put her foot down, is Serena being bratty then? Fuck no, of course not. I'm gonna make this quick because I could rant about it all day, but the showcases are awful. When I first watched them, I accepted them as a thing the girls did because anime. But with the context of May and Dawn's contests, the concept of them is so superficial and patronizing, if not outright misogynistic. The only comments that Yajima made about the showcases were about the attention given to make all the different girls look unique and the number of frames that went into animating them. And to his credit, the showcases are visually complex and stunning. But they're that way because Yajima needed Serena to look pretty. One of the previous directors, Masamitsu Hidaka, is most famous in the West for making a comment about the show needing to trade out the female lead so that the boys could have some new eye candy. His comment about the fun in being able to change girls' outfits reeks of a similar attitude to what Yajima expresses about showcases. Without a counterweight in the staff, and XY's animation team is almost exclusively male, then that type of attitude, however unconscious, does explain why Serena has such a shallow badge quest. If we're talking about patriarchy, then that's really the issue to focus on, because everything I've griped about, someone else could find empowering to their own experience. And it's not like any other Pokemon series combats patriarchy from a staffing perspective either. But here's where the major complication to the Serena is sexist argument comes from. The lion's share of Serena's episodes were written by a woman, Akemi Amode. I've kind of wanted to make a video about Akemi Amode, so I'm glad I found a way to Trojan horse her in here because Pokemon fans might actually watch a video about Serena. Akemi Amode was born in Hiroshima in 1968. She grew up a huge fan of anime. Whereas most children of her generation fondly remember playing outside and going on adventures, her favorite memory of her childhood summers was staying inside and watching reruns from the previous season. But by the time she made it to grade school, all of her friends and classmates began growing out of anime, since cartoons are kid stuff. Amode wanted to find a way to make it acceptable to enjoy anime as she entered adulthood, so she began looking into the industry. First, she tried voice acting and joined the broadcast club. She quit when she realized that her voice wasn't very good. She took up drawing, intending to learn how to animate, but abandoned that idea just as quickly. Then she finally found her calling. She read an article about the anime screenwriters Michiru Shimada and Keisuke Fujikawa. Amode was inspired by the fact that women like Shimada could be screenwriters. Amode decided that she would follow her path, and unlike her previous attempts, Amode made a bold declaration. It's not that I want to be a screenwriter, but that I will become one. To pursue her dream, Amode joined a local vocational school that taught screenwriting after she entered the workforce. Following a lecture by anime screenwriter Jinzo Toriumi, she was invited into his circle, Otori Kobo. 6 months later, Toriumi introduced her to a producer at Aiken, who asked her to manage scripts for Sazai-san, the longest-running anime of all time. Amode was soon asked to also write screenplays for Sazai-san whenever they needed a fill-in episode. After a few years, a series of fortuitous blunders led to her interviewing with another illustrious screenwriter, Takeshi Shudo. Shudo was planning the sequel to his hit 1982 magical girl series Minky Momo. He needed writers and was struggling to find ones that fit his artistic sensibilities. Shudo wasn't initially impressed with Amode, since he didn't consider Sazai-san's status quo Showa-era setting to be interesting, even if he admired Amode's talent to be in the position she was in at such a young age. But then Amode said something that intrigued Shudo. Truthfully, I'd rather write robot stories than Sazai-san. Clearly, Amode was trying to break out of the mold she found herself in. She wanted to write something more interesting than Sazai-san. And she got her wish. Shudo offered her a job writing for Minky Momo, not just the TV series, but also assisting on the OVAs. A few years later, Amode made her mecha debut on Lord of Lords Reunite, where she met and was mentored by the legendary mecha screenwriter Hiroyuki Hoshiyama. Along with Toriumi and Shudo, Amode considered Hoshiyama one of her 3 mentors. All 3 men wrote in extremely different styles and passed along important, though often contradictory, lessons about how to be a good writer. After Reunite, Amode established herself as a prominent mecha anime writer. The following year, she began writing for Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, and in 1998 she was entrusted to write the Wing novelization. Incidentally, also in 1998, Amode received a phone call from Takeshi Shudo inviting her to work on a show he was now writing, Pokemon. Amode had to decline her former mentor's invitation, though. She was now a co-writer for Gundam creator Yoshiyuki Tomino's new show, Brain-Powered. 15 years later, Amode was invited to join the writing team for Pokemon again. This time she accepted. She started X and Y as the team's only female writer. This wasn't a position she was unfamiliar with. She learned as a rookie that in order to stand out in a writer's room filled with men, she had to be self-assured and assertive. On more than one occasion, she fought with directors who changed the scripts she wrote in the storyboard phase, earning her a reputation as a woman who was really scary when made angry. Her personality comes through often on her Twitter, where she has told fans more than once that when they complain about creative decisions, it makes her more likely to double down on them. Amode is often considered Serena's main writer. Mathematically, this is true. She did write more Serena episodes than any of the other 6 writers. Amode started writing Serena around episode 59, the afore alluded to date episode. From then until Serena's arc ends with her loss at the Master Class, all of Amode's episodes were about Serena, and pretty much all of Serena's episodes were written by Amode. As the only woman on the writing team, Amode does say that she was consulted informally about Serena's redesign following the haircut, and the moment she took over Serena's episodes is suspiciously coincidental for when Serena became more than a background character. Amode's path to becoming a screenwriter, including giving up acting and animation on a whim, looks a lot like Serena's initial arc, the inciting episodes of which were written by Amode. Even if that wasn't intentional, it still feels like it comes from a place of sympathy. A place of, I know that feeling. Still, I think it's reductive to refer to Amode just as Serena's writer. She wrote for Pokemon for a year prior to X and Y and for 6 years after. And she did a lot of different things. Amode is a great character writer, not just for Serena, but also Sophocles in Sun and Moon, and Team Rocket in general. Moreover, screenwriting is a collaborative process, and the final say goes to the director. Amode was responsible for writing episodes, not the entire series. There was certainly room for her to have negotiated her experience into Serena's storyline, but it was ultimately Yajima that assigned the episode count for Serena to grow. I also can't really say that there's a huge difference between an Amode episode and one written by her male peers. Anything I griped about before doesn't go away just because she's writing it. The showcases still have all the trappings of toxic idol culture, and Serena's crush is still a gag. Finally, Akemi Amode, despite being a woman, prefers writing shonen anime. She enjoys writing battles, and most of her resume is mecha and fighting anime. She has been tapped to write girly girl romance stuff in the past, but do we really need to peg her as the default girl writer? When she also wrote Ash vs. Sawyer, largely considered the best battle of the Callous League. This may seem like a trivial stance to take, but I have my reasons. For one, referring to Amode as Serena's writer ties her to one specific thing, romance, that's not really her thing. It shortchanges her abilities and puts her into a box that, time and time again, she has said and proven she doesn't fit into. Secondly, for Pokemon fans, being Serena's writer effectively means being the writer for the Ash x Serena ship. Again, as far as anyone can tell, that was mostly Yajima's idea. Amode was just tasked with implementing it on an episode-by-episode basis. But the real problem is that even though she didn't have decision-making power, fans aren't really able to make this distinction. As such, the title of Serena's writer comes with certain expectations, and those expectations led to trouble.
You know what I'm gonna do about it? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna tweet my displeasure. That's right. I'm gonna jump on social media and I'm gonna tweet about it until my fingers bleed. I might even send an Instagram.
I talked briefly about party dancecapades earlier. The episode is a back and forth between Serena pining for Ash at this party where she never gets to dance with him. People who watch the show understand that this is a good thing, because Ash is a terrible dancer and Serena would be miserable. Moreover, Serena gets to tag with Ash in a battle against James and Serena's rival Miette, and during the course of the battle, Serena's Eevee evolves into a Sylveon. This episode was written by Akemi Amode, who, again, really likes writing battles and writes Serena like an actual character. According to Amode, when she was offered the episode, it was just pitched as a way to make Eevee evolve. She filled in all the rest. The dance party, the gags at Serena's expense, and the eventual payoff with the tag battle. When that episode dropped, Amode received threats and other toxic bullshit from fans. Why? Because Serena didn't dance with Ash, and Amode didn't make them a couple. Starting in XY, fans became way too clever for their own good. I mentioned that people were following merch ads and Japanese episode titles trying to sniff out any potential news. This behavior made a lot of people think that they were much smarter than they actually were. The fandom began believing things and expecting things that were not rational in any way. Akemi Amode, pegged as Serena's writer, was the person everyone believed was behind Amore shipping. Fans from all around the world stalked her Twitter, trying to find secret hints that Ash and Serena would get together soon. When they didn't get what they wanted, and felt that they were owed, they decided she was to blame. When Amode tweeted out a semi-apology for the episode, tons of fans did stand up for her. But some couldn't read the room, telling her how disappointed they were in her, while others went on tirades begging her to fulfill Serena's romance. This is the most famous example of Amode being harassed, but it was only the beginning. In February 2016, Pokemon Sun and Moon was announced. Long-term anime fans understood that this meant that XY would end within the year. Fans became more and more desperate, hoping for some sign that the show would continue as is. Amode would post tweets weekly as the series wrapped up, and you can see a steady but perceptible increase in fans begging her to add more shipping material. When Aya Matsui, the first woman writer for Pokemon, returned to write for XY, her tweets got inundated with similar begging. But to be fair, she had it coming. She dared to write one whole episode about Serena.
That's right, and on that tweet, in that tweet, and however many characters I get, I am gonna threaten. That's right, if I don't get what I want, I'm gonna riot.
Things hit their peak from the late summer onward. Ash lost in the finals of the Pokemon League, Serena was pretty much confirmed to not be staying, and finally, the poster for the Sun and Moon anime dropped. Every step of the way, people crashed out. Amode got harassed for things she had nothing to do with. By August, she finally had to speak up and tell people she would ignore unpleasant replies from now on. When Serena's finale aired, Amode asked the fans to please support Serena's choice to move on. The fans responded, saying no. To this day, diehard fans insist that they got scammed. They got whatever the heteronormative equivalent of being queer-baited was. That they were promised a league win, an ending romance, and a bunch of other shit that they weren't. But the fandom had created an ecosystem that fed in hopium while blocking out any realistic expectation. The actual interest in Serena, or X and Y, was never about what the show was doing. It was about what the show could do if the writers would just change the show to be about what the fans wanted. At the end of the day, though, the fans got everything they wanted, except the one thing they probably knew, deep down, they couldn't have. Regardless of how I feel about Tetsuya Yajima's conception of Serena, the fact is, he added the kiss at the last moment because he loved the fans. This behavior didn't end with X and Y. Tetsuya Yajima created a Twitter account after the final episode aired. Anytime he tweeted anything about Pokemon, even praise for Sun and Moon's new direction, fans bombarded his replies asking when Serena was returning. For years after, both his and Amode's social media were being stalked by fans for any hint, any sign of Serena news. Yajima got a fair mix of people who wanted him to do something, and people who hated him for doing anything with Serena to begin with. For both of them, things got really ugly after Sun and Moon ended. Amode wrote a controversial episode in Journeys where the deuteragonist of that series, Go, caught a Suicune. She didn't decide that Go was going to catch Suicune, that was above her pay grade. But for the plot that she was given, she produced a good episode. Fans didn't think so. The fans utterly shit on her. Later on, when X and Y character returns were teased, she got the same begging and pleading that came 5 years earlier about when Serena was going to return and marry Ash. She didn't. Serena did return, Amode didn't write the episode, and nothing was resolved. Amode tweeted that she kind of wanted to write Serena's return, but said that she got another exciting episode to write later. This was probably an allusion to the Ash Greninja return that she also got massive amounts of hate for a visual change she, again, had nothing to do with. Tetsuya Yajima got death threats over Twitter for the Serena return episode. He didn't work on that episode. At that point, he barely worked on the show. But he, like Amode, is permanently linked with Serena in the fans' minds, and therefore to blame for them not getting what they wanted 10 years ago.
And if that doesn't work, then by God, me and my friend Mark, we're gonna stop watching.
If only.
That's right.
What do you think Shuda would have thought of Serena? Because obviously Serena was very focused on the shipping aspect in terms of her having a much more obvious crush on Ash than even Misty did.
I tried to avoid bringing up anything like post AG for the video I did, but Serena especially, because I can foresee someone in a comment section or someone quoting my video on Twitter or whatever saying like, what Shudo feared about Misty eventually came to be in Serena. And I think that's partially true.
I'm writing this conclusion a few days before Legend CA releases. I can't use social media right now because the ROM was leaked a few days ago, and if I try to get on Twitter, I'm going to get inundated with not just spoilers, but premature takes based on a few isolated clips that people have uploaded. I used to be of the opinion that leak culture was fine so long as it was contained. Provided no one was being spoiled who didn't want to be, there was no harm done. But nowadays, I've come around to the idea that waiting around for leaks just makes people worse. There is no anticipation for this game, just for the hype that comes with random drops of info. Fandoms in general are not able to separate the speculation about a thing from the thing itself, and whatever preconceived notions people come to become the reality they live in. By the time this game comes out, people's minds will have been made up, because some subreddit or Twitter checkmark handed their opinions to them. And other takes, no matter how well formed, are not going to be met with kindness if they deviate from the consensus. At this point in the video, I hope I don't need to explain why I'm bringing all this up in a video about Serena. Talking about Serena, what you like, what you hate, seems futile when you realize that a substantial part of the fandom's appreciation for her character is entirely transactional. The discourse for a Serena return is rarely about her progressing towards her dream unless that dream involves becoming Ash's wife, something the anime was never, and is never, going to do. Unfortunately, the anime won't ever touch her again, because the fanbase surrounding her is deranged. In the Terror Leaks, a conversation between Game Freak and the Pokemon Company revealed that one of the major fears in retiring Ash was that certain aggrieved elements of the fandom might repeat the Kyoto animation tragedy and commit arson in retaliation. The examples they brought up were the death threats that Yajima received during Serena's return. Nothing I've seen from interacting with that side of the fanbase has led me to believe that their fears are unfounded. If you get nothing else from this video, I want it to be that regardless of how popular she is, there is nothing special about how Serena was written that makes the fanbase surrounding her this way. The fact is, this is a lesson against falling into the cult-like behavior of hype cycles, which the Pokemon anime fandom still hasn't learned. The same behaviors exist now as in 2016. People still hunt down Korokoro when it drops, hoping to get a scoop on episode titles and staff lists. Now that leaks are fully enmeshed in the culture, the ability of people to separate speculation from promise is entirely gone. And yes, there have been many crash outs since 2023. There will be another one near the end of Horizons when Liko has to leave. I hope Kuriha Matsuzawa doesn't go through what Akemi Yamode did, but I also doubt he will, because Liko's not as popular as Serena. I don't want to end this video on a sour note because that's letting the terrorists win. Circling back to where this video began, instead of bitching about the discourse being what it is, I want to try to make it better. I have said pretty much everything I have ever wanted to say about Serena, and my opinions have probably made more than a few of you very, very mad. So I've invited my friend Thomas to contribute. Thomas is a real filmmaker who posts a variety of his own short films on his YouTube channel, TheMindofThomas. He is also in production on a documentary, chronicling the Pokemon anime's production and fandom throughout the Ash Ketchum era. The clip at the beginning of this section is an interview I did with him where I talked about Takeshi Shudo. You know, just to be different. Thomas is a true Serena believer. He is going to challenge me and talk about why I'm wrong on your behalf. But more than that, I hope it serves as an invitation. The bar is in hell, and we need more people like Thomas to get it above water. Consider that a challenge to do better than me. If you can.
In my years of studying and learning the craft of storytelling, I've often heard a saying, usually, though perhaps erroneously attributed to contemporary actor Sterling K. Brown. Any great art is meant to illuminate the human condition. In its decades on the air, the Pokemon anime has shared an interesting relationship with this philosophy. From the very beginning, one of the show's core themes has been communication, specifically how humans relate to these animalistic but not quite beings that inhabit their planet. But under the guidance of Kunihiko Yuyama, it was also an idealized version of childhood, an eternal summer vacation. At its best, this framing was able to capture an innocent, often overlooked part of the human condition. But as the show went on, it often had the opposite effect, just coming across as static, sterile, and most devastating to any story, unrelatable. Nevertheless, Serena is a character who is able to break through that mold. While yes, hype culture, unrealistic expectations, and communal dreams of a more mature Pokemon anime fueled her popularity, her character has stood the test of time for a reason. I believe this is because Serena is a character that perfectly exemplifies messy, imperfect humanity. Truth is right that on the surface, Serena's arc does follow the blueprint designed for May and Advanced Generation. For both young girls who set out on a journey without any sort of goal or dream in mind. At its core, that's a very human, relatable story. What sets Serena apart from May is how they build upon that baseline, adding more nuance and emotional undertones that humanize it even further. There's a common misconception that the only reason Serena sets out on her journey is to reunite with Ash. In reality, however, her motivations are more layered. Like many children, she's fed up with her home life and mother. Going out on a journey would mean finally getting away from the Rhyhorn racing she dreads. And if you watch the show, she later admits to that being her core motivation for setting out. That begs an important question. Why didn't she just leave sooner? The answer lies in her inability to make commitments. We learn that Serena has a hard time following through on things. Her mother noticed that lack of drive and tried to force Rhyhorn racing on her as a result. But internally, this only reinforced Serena's mindset about herself. By the age of 10, she could leave anytime she wanted. Why would she when she had nothing better to do? Despite her outward snark and rebellion, deep down, she had convinced herself there was no escape. But then comes along a news report showing that her childhood crush is nearby. And being the romantic that she is, she builds something of a Cinderella story in her head, where she reunites with Prince Charming after the metaphorical ball, and finds a life outside her quote-unquote cruel mother. While things don't go perfectly as she sets off, Serena actually gets the fairy tale arc she wanted to an extent. While Ash doesn't remember her at first, he ends up inviting her to the party, a surprising first for the series. From then on, she blissfully explores the wonders of the Pokemon world with her crush and new friends. But eventually, her past catches up to her as she realizes everyone around her, Ash included, is motivated by dreams. This becomes the foundation for the latter half of Serena's arc as she starts Pokemon performances. Her haircut symbolizes a step toward maturity, while her taking up the blue ribbon from Ash represents her broader ambition, to become an equal to those she admires. While the dynamic of inequality was left unbalanced by the end of the XY series, everything comes full circle with her return in Journeys 105. At this point in the timeline, Serena comes across like a completely different character. We see her grow fully realized as she mentors Chloe, who up to this point has had a similar arc of uncertainty to Serena. But the real capstone on her character development comes in the controversial, often misunderstood reunion scene between her and Ash, because it's where the two finally become the equals we always hoped for. The episode expertly builds up to this scene by planting small moments of tension for the returning audience. My favorite example of this is the scene where Chloe gets a call from Go while on the bench with Serena. Obviously, the irony comes from the fact that Ash is on the other end of the line, and everyone is blissfully unaware of their mutual connections. But the brilliance lies not only in the writing, but in the storyboard itself. After Ash leans into the phone to talk to Chloe, the scene match cuts to have Serena in the exact same part of the frame, leaning away from Chloe to give her privacy. Not only does this set up the idea of Ash and Serena now being equal counterparts to each other, but it also builds the stakes for the audience, desperate for a reunion. This visual symbolism carries into the reunion scene itself. After Chloe asks how Ash and Serena know each other, there's an important shot where the camera lingers on them. Not only does it elicit a sense of satisfaction that the two are together again at last, but the framing indulges in the idealistic fantasy of them as a pair. At least in this shot, the two feel made for each other. But ultimately, this idealism doesn't last. Mere seconds later, the boat moves away, leading into one of the most beautifully human moments in the entire anime. Ash and Serena only get seconds to share what's most important to both of them, their dreams. And for once in the relationship, there's genuine balance. They're framed in parallel throughout their exchange, equals at last. Ash even speaks first, a role that, had this scene taken place during XY, likely would have belonged to Serena instead. Whether or not he felt something deeper, we'll never know. But what's certain is that their dynamic has evolved, just as Serena herself has. But the timing is too late. Their dreams have taken them on different paths, symbolized as the boat drifts farther and farther away. But emotionally, Serena hasn't moved on. She stays at the dock past sunset, because ultimately, despite all the ways she's changed both internally and externally, she's still the same human being we've always known, with feelings and desires that aren't always rational. The dock lights turn green here, which is commonly believed to be an allusion to The Great Gatsby. There's a misconception that this is a sign of true love between the characters. But if you read The Great Gatsby, or watch any of its film adaptations, you'll find a depressingly human story of a man who longs for his past lover, Daisy Buchanan. To him, the green light at the end of her dock represents the dream of rekindling this romance. A dream that, throughout the story, we realize is unreachable. The idea of unreachable dreams isn't anything new for Pokemon. In fact, it was the entire basis for the ending of Ash's story. In an ironic twist of fate, Serena truly has become Ash's equal. The green light is her rainbow. Both are forever bound to chasing dreams that are just out of reach. Sylveon takes concern for Serena's obvious feelings beneath the surface. In a hauntingly human shot, we see Serena lost in an introspective, wistful trance against the backdrop of stars. In one emotional punch, it's as if Serena's entire arc flashes before our eyes, as we finally see the character in her true, purest form. And then, she heads off with Sylveon on her own way. Not quite having moved on, but not quite stuck either. A realistic dichotomy that, in my opinion, truly illuminates the human condition.